New Year's resolutions are fucking hard. In 2021, I wanted to do a lot of things. I wanted to get good at billiards. I wanted to read more. I wanted to spend less time on the internet. And I didn't do any of those things. So we're gonna do something that I know I'm capable of doing, and that is watching a fuck ton of movies. I'm gonna be watching a movie a day for the year of 2022, and I'm gonna do these monthly roundups where I'm gonna talk about the movies that I saw, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought, and we're going to have so much fun together. It's gonna be great. Big shout out to Karsten Runquist. He does content like this all the time, and I am doing it too. By the way, if you've been at my YouTube channel for long enough, hi, I'm in a different apartment now. I'm in a different state now. I have my dream job now. Wow, okay, a lot of changes. But yeah, that doesn't stop the fact that I need to be bettering myself creatively, consistently on my own. So not just in a professional landscape, but in a personal landscape. And I think spending 4 years at film school taught me a lot about how to talk about movies, and I don't talk about movies enough. So this is what I'm here to do. Okay, so I want to set some ground rules really quick because I'm planning on this being a series on my channel. My rule is if the movie is more than 5 years old, it's gonna be in spoiler territory. So I'm just gonna be talking about the movie quite openly. And I'm going to make use of the chapter system that YouTube has so that every movie will have its own chapter. So if you're not interested in getting a movie spoiled, then you can skip through it. Anything newer than 5 years, I'm going to try and keep it spoiler free. But if I need to like delve into it, then there will be a big flashing text bar telling you to skip if you're not interested in being spoiled. I think most of these movies can be discussed without strict spoiler talk. So I'm not super worried about that, but just as an audience member, just like keeping that in mind. Also, I love disagreeing. I love disagreements. I love active, combative conversation. Polite discourse is encouraged. I was going through my Letterboxd reviews and talking with some friends about everything that I've rated 5 stars since I started using the app in 2017. And there's a lot of stuff there that's like maybe a little inflated. So these reviews might be a little inflated. My Letterboxd reviews are immediately after finishing the movie, and then this is after sitting on these movies for a month. So hopefully they'll be a little more settled in my brain, and I'll have a stronger idea of how I actually feel. But if you super disagree with the way I feel about something, let me know. I want to hear it. I want to talk about it. This is why I'm doing this. I want to communicate with movie lovers. Also, I have a lot of movies I need to see this year, 365 at least. So if you have a favorite movie that I haven't seen, drop it in the comments, please. I want to see as many movies as I can. I'm going out on a limb on so many different genres that I don't have a lot of experience with. So yeah. Oh my God, is it time? Is it time to do it? I'm like weirdly nervous. I don't really know why. The first movie I saw this year was ENCANTO, the newest film from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and I went into this movie actually ready to hate it, which I'm a little ashamed to say. The first thing that I noticed about this when I was watching the teaser trailer was how distracted I was by the facial animation, and I'm actually still interested in making a video about that and kind of writing a video essay about why I believe that facial animation in feature animation is getting worse. So if that interests you, let me know, because I'm kind of flirting with the idea of writing about that. So in the teaser, I was really off-put by how kind of obnoxious the faces were, and I found it really distracting from the dialogue and from the movement and from the story. And so I went into the movie looking for that distraction, really. And I would say that it's less than I was expecting, and I thought the movie actually was really successful and really fun. I thought the music was great. I'm not the biggest Lin-Manuel Miranda fan, and he kind of blew me away with this. I think he actually works really well in an animated scape. I guess it's important to note that I am also not really a musical person. I'm gonna try and watch as many musicals as I can this year, just because I feel like I'm on the brink of it, where I'm like, I'm not a musical person, and everyone's telling me, yeah, you are. You liked this movie, you liked that movie, you liked this movie, you liked all these movies. They're musicals. You like musicals. But I thought the music was really great. Total earworm. I was sitting on the couch with my boyfriend and he loved it too, bobbing his head. He hates musicals as well. I thought the hero's journey of this was really powerful, but the ending was a huge, huge disappointment. I thought everything that they built into the film to establish the character's journey was thrown away right at the last minute. Like the last 2 minutes of the film was just like, wow, we're making changes. Just kidding. And that really bothered me. I actually ended up giving this movie 2.5 stars because I was so pissed that the ending was such a cop-out. Colorful, beautiful, it has a lot of rewatch value. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. Next we have The Lost Daughter, which came out last year as well, relatively new release from Maggie Gyllenhaal. This is her directorial debut. I actually watched Karsten's video talking about this movie as well in one of his monthly wrap-ups, and I think he actually said it perfectly, where this feels like a directorial debut, and not necessarily in a bad way, but there's no real handwriting to this. However, I think the performances are really nice. I like the way that this is shot, where it feels kind of voyeuristic because you're following the main character as she's kind of scoping out this family from afar, and then when she gets closer to them, you're really in it. You're in these intimate moments with the whole family and with her past when you're going back and meeting her own family and her own kids. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it, and I really wish that I looked like Dakota Johnson in a bikini. So yeah, I gave this 3.5 stars as well. Then I saw The Piano Teacher by Michael Haneke. This is from 2001, and it's a mindfuck for sure. I think this is the first Michael Haneke movie I've ever seen, and I knew what I was getting into before watching this, and I was still like really surprised at every turn. This movie's fucked up, so proceed with caution, but I thought handling this really serious character study was done so elegantly and so perfectly that this is kind of a cornerstone of a character study, and like handling these really sensitive topics with, not necessarily with grace, but just in a way that is so compelling and gripping. I think it's really beautiful how we watch our main character open herself up in a way that she's not used to, and then in the end up getting taken advantage of by the man that she opened up to. I wasn't expecting it. I really enjoyed it. The performances in this thing are excellent. Isabelle Huppert, who plays Erica, our main character, is so good. This is probably one of the best performances I've ever seen. There's so much subtlety in her performance, where she's very quiet, she's very reserved, she's very stoic, and she's making mood changes in the scene just with her eyes and just the way that she looks at the characters she's sharing a scene with. I can recommend this movie just on her performance alone. Yeah, 5 stars without a doubt. This is excellent, but it's hard to recommend to everyone. Up next, I saw Vice. This is kind of a random choice. It came up on my Hulu, I think. This came out in 2018. This movie generally isn't a very good movie. I think it's kind of sloppy. The editing is kind of bizarre. There's a lot of tonal shifts of it being like, hey, this is crazy, right? Isn't this nuts? To it being very serious. It's enough to draw me through this movie, just learning about Dick Cheney when he was in office, because I was born in 98, so I don't have a lot of like firsthand experience of his time in the White House, and I don't remember the impact that he had in the moment. So learning about that after the fact is really jarring. So this could have been like a Ken Burns style documentary about Dick Cheney, and I probably would have been just as invested, just because the story of his life is just so fucking crazy, and how he was able to get away with so much. Fucking crazy. I mean, yeah, again, the movie's not great, but I think like what I learned in the movie stuck with me, and I'm glad that I learned it. I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. Up next, I saw Mulholland Drive, a David Lynch classic. I think this is actually the first thing from David Lynch I've seen, and it was a really good one. I was super, super impressed. First of all, I wasn't expecting this to be gay. It is awesome. It's so hard to make a movie that's designed to not make sense. This is the type of movie where if you read reviews of this or you talk to people about it, like most of the time they're going to be saying, oh, I finished it. I had no idea what was going on. This made no sense. I don't understand it. And to keep people enthralled by a confusing story is challenging, because I think it's really easy for something to be so out of the realm of believability or reality that an audience member is much more inclined to like just be turned off, because they're like, whatever, this is just making up rules. With this, it's like so expertly crafted in this, having the two characters be seemingly just as new to the mystery, because one doesn't remember what happened and one wasn't there when it happened. So they're trying to learn it all together, and it's just bizarre and beautiful. I think it's well shot. I think the performances are pretty good. I was super pleasantly surprised by this one, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Up next is The Worst Person in the World, which is a new release directed by Joachim Trier. This was like in my head actively for like 2 weeks after I watched it. This movie's like kind of a gut punch. It really realistically represents confusion. Like when you're just kind of like sitting in your life and realizing that all of these choices that you've made that led you to where you're standing right now are wrong and you're not happy. And she just chooses to kind of change everything and move forward. It's really upsetting. This is sort of the perfect movie to come out in like a pandemic time because the character just feels like something's wrong. She doesn't know what's wrong and she needs to make all of these changes, and there's a lot of regret and a lot of guilt and all of this stuff. So like watching it as an audience member is just like, oh fuck, like, oh my god, this is, now I need to look at my life in the same way that Julie looked at her life and make all of these challenging choices. And it sounds kind of simple, but I think the main theme of the whole thing is just like, aren't we all just our own worst person in our own world? And the answer is no. That's just life. That's just the way life is. That's the way you walk through life, is that you make choices that end up not working out, but they move you forward no matter what. I really loved this one. I was super blown away by it, and I gave this one 5 stars. Oh boy, okay, now we've got a heater. I saw Licorice Pizza, the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Let's make this very clear. So people really are kind of torn in half by this movie, right? If you've seen any reviews of this, you know that people are either like really in love with it and love the tone and just the aesthetic qualities of this thing, and others are like, this is about, let's look at this from the outside here. I think, yeah, it's beautiful. It's shot in such a lovely way. The colors are beautiful. We saw it on 70mm at our local theater. Very worth it. I think the music was amazing, you know, such a time and place. And I thought the simplicity of the story was really nice. It's just these two people that are young and inexperienced, and they're trying to almost one-up each other in their responsibility. And I think that's tied into the ages of these characters. So I believe Gary Valentine, our young man, is 15 or 16, and Alana Kane is 25, I think. So Alana is living at home still with her family. She's 25. She's working at a photography business, and Gary is still in high school, but he's an actor and he's really living his life, and he's so professional and so successful. And so in order to seem more adult, Gary is trying to push the boundaries, get these jobs, be like a man's man, and Alana is trying to push back and be like, I am also an adult, even though I'm still living at home. So the insecurity of her is pushing back on Gary. Well, I'm an adult. No, I'm an adult. No, I'm an adult. Which is compelling in its own right. I enjoy that character study of those two people together. What I don't like is them falling in love. This really could have functioned as just sort of like a give him a noogie at the end of the movie and be like, no, you're my friend, I like you. But the way they close the movie is kind of bizarre, and it leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. The whole movie sort of functions as if it's not as big of a deal as it kind of is, and obviously this is the 70s versus in 2022 now. There's different context for these things, but it's hard as a modern audience member to watch it and just ignore that giant elephant in the room. This movie could have been great. But it's hard to be great when there's this like weird, messy thing under the surface that Anderson chooses not to discuss. In the moment, I actually gave this 3 stars, and I think that's probably pretty close to the way I still feel about it now. It could have been great, and it wasn't. Up next, I saw Girl Interrupted. This has been on my list forever. This came out in 1999 with Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie. If you've been on Tumblr for any bit of time, you've probably seen snippets of this movie. I didn't get a lot out of this film at all. This movie, all it told me was like, you should read the book. A lot of my friends really love it. I'm missing that piece a little bit. It was a little surface level, and I don't have much more to say about it other than I bought the book and I'm going to be reading it. So I'll see if the movie kind of has a nice marriage with the book, or if it's sort of just like an oversimplified version of the book. In general, I think our main character wasn't as compelling as some of her friends that are at the mental institution and that get their little snippets of backstory and that we begin to learn more about later in the film. It's more of just her being an observer of these other people, but I'm more interested in the story of our main character because it's based on a memoir. So I didn't really grip onto this one, but this one's such a super popular one. If you disagree with me, please let me know, because I would love to hear what you guys really are digging your teeth into for this one. I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. Oh man. Okay. Up next, I saw Silver Linings Playbook. Wow. Okay. Basically, this movie is like two people with mental disorders fall in love, and that's great. However, the way that people are talking about this movie, about it being like a feel-good dramedy rom-com, I don't know what they're seeing. I don't know what they're watching. I was bummed the fuck out through this whole movie. I think their depictions of mental illness are really accurate and really gritty, actually. And the performances by Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence are pretty good. I don't think they have any chemistry. And so when they end up coming together in the end, I'm like, okay, that you just made that choice because you had to make that choice. There's a whole other side to this where like you've got the two main characters that are battling it out, and just the sadness of Bradley Cooper being in such denial over his relationship with his ex-wife. He keeps calling her his wife. And they're gonna get back together as soon as he gets out of the hospital. Jennifer Lawrence's character is trying to like get something out of him by having him participate in this dance thing, married in with this subplot of Bradley Cooper's super superstitious family and football and heavy amounts of risky gambling, and all that shit is just like icky. I don't know. It didn't feel good. None of it felt good to me. I mean, like, go Birds, I guess, but like it doesn't mean anything to me, and I just really didn't grasp onto these characters at all. I kind of hated everyone in this movie, I'll be honest. I don't know what everyone was seeing. Everybody loves this thing. I don't. I gave it 1.5 stars. Up next, I saw Monster from 2003 from Patty Jenkins. I'm basically the same after finishing this movie. This didn't really stick with me in any way. I think the writing it left a lot to be desired. One of my biggest pet peeves, period, in any type of film and any type of media is bad dialogue writing. And it's really hard to write convincing dialogue between two characters, but it's so easy to make bad dialogue. And, you know, these two gritty women that are on the brink of homelessness saying fuck a lot is realistic, sure, but it's super distracting and annoying, so it's a lot of fuck, fucking fuck, fuck. And I find that really boring. As a movie, this was fine. Eileen Wuornos' story is really interesting, and I like this type of character of like becoming so traumatized by a man in your life that you can't trust men for the rest of your life. I think that's really interesting, and there's a seed of a really interesting character study there. This just didn't hit the mark for me. I gave this one 2.5 stars. I saw Fantasia. I think this is the first time that I've ever seen Fantasia all the way through, but my boyfriend was here and he was feeling a little down in the dumps, a little lacking in inspiration, and I thought that Fantasia would be the perfect thing to put on because it's so good. I think the whole thing is incredible, but the beginning, the incredibly abstracted forms of the music are magical, because if you have these shapes kind of going on in your head and there's strings playing, like what visually is that doing in your head? When I'm watching this, it's like, oh, they nailed that. That's exactly what I would think. That's exactly how I feel these sounds look in my head. It's so experimental for its time, and it's just such an honor to have something like this. Fun fact, I actually have never seen Fantasia 2000, so that's on my list too. Yeah, Oliver cried, mission accomplished, 5 stars. Up next, is this a movie? I'm not sure. I saw the Harry Potter 20th anniversary Return to Hogwarts thing. This was great. I'm a fan of the Harry Potter series. I'm a fan of the movies. It's a cornerstone of my family and my childhood, and it's something that we bond over and all enjoy together. I was like really shockingly moved by this. I really enjoyed it. I thought that they spoke so candidly to one another. It didn't feel canned. You know, they go through their first little bit where they see each other for the first time in however long, and then they're like, it's been so long, but honestly, it feels like it hasn't been that long. You know, like they go through the boring shit, but then they speak really candidly about how much the movies have changed their life and reminiscing on the memories of their audition tapes. I cried. I gave it 4.5 stars. Nothing really, you know, it's not like a great movie. It's not shot super well, but like, it's really nice and it made me happy, and I miss how excited I was about Harry Potter stuff, and now it's all ruined. So thanks, J.K. Rowling. Then I saw Euphoria, Fuck Anyone Who's Not a Sea Blob. This is one of the long form episodes slash mini movies. I don't know what you would call this, but 2 of these, they're part 1 and part 2, came out in between the first season and the second season during the throes of the pandemic. So it was small cast, small crew, making part 1 about Rue's story after the first season and part 2 about Jules's story after the first season, which is what I watched. Hunter Schafer, who plays Jules in the series, actually was in the writer's room for this one. I think she took part in quite a bit of the story writing for this. And it is excellent. It's basically taking us through a therapy appointment with Jules as she tries to navigate through her choices from the previous year. And this is good dialogue writing. This is so natural, so honest, a really beautiful representation of queerness and just the confusion that Jules is going through of transitioning and detransitioning and her relationship with gender, and how that relationship is automatically a representation of how everybody else feels about her, and it's just a very loaded subject in her life that she needs to think about all the time. I think it's shot beautifully. It has the typical amount of HBO nudity, which, by the way, I don't know if any of you are watching season 2. Oh my god. Can we like cool it on the boobs? Like, I love boobs, but it's too much boob. They're supposed to be 17. It's too much boob. And I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, then I saw 16 Candles. Whoa, okay. So I haven't seen a lot of John Hughes movies. I'm a big fan of The Breakfast Club, and this has been on my watch list for a long time. Could you have guessed that this was overwhelmingly rapey and overwhelmingly racist? Okay. Yeah, it is. This is so hard to watch. And I think like, it's one of those movies where it's not like Fantasia, for example, where it's like, oh, if you see the original version of Fantasia where there's a lot of racially insensitive references and content in the characters, you're like, whoa, ouch. But this was in a time and place and the whole thing isn't affected by it. You can take those pieces out and it's still a beautiful piece of work. This is like completely dependent on horribly out of place racism and like date rape and just taking advantage of young women. It's just like so weird, and there's like nothing good about it. It's so unwatchable. I gave this 1 star. I think that's a little too high. Okay, my stomach is rumbling. I need a snack. Oh my god, I forgot I had Doritos. This is about to be ASMR content. Do you ever like shop at Trader Joe's a long time and then forget what name brand snacks taste like? Me too. Okay, so next movie on my list was a friend's recommendation to me called Short Term 12. This was really nice. There is so much honesty in this movie, and I love the performances being, like, they felt so genuine, and Grace is actually played by Brie Larson, so she's got this kind of gritty, detached style with the kids where she's, you know, she's tough but fair. And then when she meets a new foster kid, Jaden, ends up kind of eroding from that tough exterior and softening up to her because she sees a lot of herself in her. There's a lot of compassion and a lot of really sweet character moments here. I don't know if I was just not emotionally available for something like this, but it didn't really hit me in a way that it probably should have. I don't even have a lot of critique on like what I believe could have made this better. It's hard to rate this one because it's like, it was so nice and like the story was so sweet and the characters were good and the performances were nice, but generally this did very little for me, which is confusing and that doesn't make sense. But in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Up next, we have The Danish Girl. It's really hard for me to not only summarize this movie, but talk about this movie because I am not a part of the LGBT community and I don't believe it's my place to scold people on the effectiveness or non-effectiveness of the writing for the trans experience. That's not my place. I think it's really hard for me to be like, this was bad. This was a bad representation of the trans identity. This was toxic. This was damaging. It's not my place to say any of those things, but I think you should listen to trans women and trans people who are talking about the flaws of this movie and listen thoughtfully. There's an incredibly thorough review on Letterboxd by Sally Jane Black, who is a trans woman, about this movie, and actually puts everything into perspective really well, because I think it's really easy to be like, this happened so long ago. Of course it's going to be outdated. Of course the way they speak about transgenderism is going to feel really weird nowadays. But she puts all that into account and writes about how this could have been better. I recommend reading it. Generally, as a viewer, I thought it was pretty. I thought it was shot really well. I appreciated the differences in physicality as Einar becomes Lily, and the subtle differences of the way she chooses to carry herself, and, you know, sitting in a certain way versus sitting in this way. I liked all of that. It felt really natural and true to me. There was a cute dog. I thought the costumes were nice. I like movies about painting, but in the end, I gave this one 2 stars. Up next, I saw Heroin. This is a short Netflix documentary following 3 women, a fire chief, a judge, and a street missionary as they battle West Virginia's devastating opioid epidemic. Short, so it didn't really dive in as deeply as they could, but I think they did really establish the seriousness of the problem very early on. And these women are fucking heroes. Like, following them around is so moving because they're so incredibly good at what they do. They're compassionate, which is rare when you're dealing with drug addicts. People are assholes. There's a specific moment where there are EMTs at, I think, like a gas station or something, and someone's passed out on the ground from a believed overdose. And as they're helping him back up after giving him Narcan and stuff, they get another call for an overdose, and then they go to that one, and after that they get another call. It's like an endless cycle that is really, really well represented. So if you have 39 minutes and are interested in this subject, I would recommend giving it a watch. I gave it 4 stars. I saw the 2nd season of Cheer on Netflix. I saw season 1 when it came out, and I was impressed by it. I thought it was shot really well. I thought the drama felt really real, because it is, but you know, it's hard to make it read on screen. I thought it was very well done. But season 2 really stepped it up. I thought season 2 was much better than season 1. It's following our previous heroes, our winners, Navarro, Cheer, and the devastation that 2020 has wrought on them. The pandemic obviously made things really hard, canceled all their competitions and things. It was harder for them to come back together and rehearse. There was a lot of drama with one of their team members getting arrested. The newfound fame of the team and all of the expectations being put on them to be on TV and go to Ellen and do this and do that and be actors and blah, 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 blah. And in the meantime, the series also chooses to focus on their rival team, which is Trinity Valley. And they are rivals, and they're right next to each other and are as good as one another. But the first season made it feel like Navarro, nobody's touching them, they're so good. And this one really, really heightened the stakes because of all of this stuff happening to Navarro, and Trinity Valley is just right there, kicking ass, doing just as well. I think this drama is fucking great. The way that this is shot is so badass, and it's impossible to watch this and be like, Cheer's not a sport, whatever, man, I can do that, that's easy. What they're doing is fucking hard, and it's fun to watch. I gave this 4.5 stars. I was super impressed by the 2nd season. And then I saw Uncut Gems. Woo, I was avoiding this one for a long time. I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. This is so tense. This whole movie is so tense. And I remember watching this from afar when my dad was watching it and being like, this is so annoying. All they're doing is screaming. But when I was in it, when I watched it from beginning to end, I thought, they keep the tension so high, and the energy is like, your heart is like pounding for the entire 2 hours of this thing. It is excellent. And you know, the whole time you're watching the main character be like, dude, stop, what are you doing? Stop, you're getting yourself in trouble, stop doing this. But his contagious energy and the way that it's shot and the way that the story is being represented of just like, come on, we gotta go, it's a rush, we gotta, it's like hard to not question it. You're just going with it. And this was so successfully done. I was blown away by this. I can't wait to watch it again. I gave this 5 stars. I was pumped. Then I saw The House. This is a stop motion. Yay! If you don't know, I work in the stop motion animation industry, and I am partial, okay? So I think no matter what, if it's stop motion, I'm gonna give it a higher rate than it probably deserves because it's fucking stop motion and we need to make more of it and it's beautiful. I know a lot of people were overall quite disappointed with it. I liked it for what it was. I think what I'm hearing a lot of is just like, oh, well, these stories would have been better if, but I think I liked the subtlety of these stories. I like that it's about the house and it's about the attachment that these people are bringing onto the house. And the stories are loosely related to one another, but the through line is the house. So it's really just sort of like, I think my dad described it as like the reject pile of like Twilight Zone episodes. Not to say that they're bad, but just because they don't unify. I think it gets better as it goes along. It's pretty sad and dour, and as you go through the 3 sequences, it gets a little more optimistic. I think the 3rd sequence with the cats is my favorite. Everything that you see in this film is handmade. The set, obviously the house, is beautiful. All the puppets are beautiful. You can feel the fur moving as physical hand is touching it in between frames. In the moment, I gave this 4.5 stars. It's probably not a 4.5 star movie, but coming out of it, I was really inspired and really just excited to be able to work on something like this. Land at around a 3.5, 4 star range. Up next, I rewatched Family Guy Presents Blue Harvest. I know. Here's the thing. I'm not a fan of Family Guy, but I think these Star Wars parodies that Family Guy did are really good. I love when you can watch something like this and know that the people who are working behind it are such enormous fans of the source material. I reference this thing all the time. My boyfriend and I love it. I rewatch it pretty consistently. I think it's really funny. And I love nerds who are able to talk about the thing that they love in a critiquing way while still being lighthearted. I like it. I don't care. I gave it 3.5 stars just because I've seen it so many times. Up next, I saw Tick Tick Boom, and I'm a little stuck about how I feel about this one. This follows the guy who wrote Rent, before he wrote Rent. But the way that they talk about this is sort of like this building pressure of like, I need to make something great. I can't make it to 30 before establishing myself in the musical theater world because right now I'm a playwright who waits tables, and if I'm 30, then I'm a waiter who writes plays. And I think that pressure is really interesting. Something was missing for me because I wanted it to push into his success. Spoiler alert, he doesn't become a success before he's 30. He writes a kind of crummy play because he's desperate to be successful, and after that he writes a play called Tick Tick Boom, which we learn nothing about, and after that he writes Rent. And he didn't even, spoiler alert, he didn't even get to see Rent live. He died right before it went on stage for the first time. He was like 34 or something like that. And that part of the story is really interesting to me and tragic, really sad. But to kind of expand the story of like pressure, I need to make something, and then he doesn't, and then really quickly wrapping up at the end like, oh, by the way, he wrote another thing, oh, and then he wrote the thing that you know about, and not expanding on that at all kind of is like a tease. But I think Andrew Garfield was great in this. I think the music was actually a pleasant surprise, meaning I was expecting to absolutely hate it because I hate the Rent soundtrack, and the same guy wrote these songs and they're really good. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I rewatched the Death Note anime as well. My boyfriend saw it for the first time and I've seen it probably 2 or 3 times all the way through. I always go back to this one. I think the cat and mouse is really successful. However, this could be cut in half. This is way longer than it needs to be because it's the same thing over and over again, where it's like, this guy thinks I'm Kita. What if I do this? That'll really show him. And then the other guy is like, that's exactly what Kita would do. And it's just that for 37 episodes. By episode 4, he's already a suspect, and it goes on for 37 episodes. So it's ridiculous and unbelievable. But I think it's really interesting. I think the writing is really good. I like the really creative ways that Light tries to stay out of trouble and try to be as non-suspicious as possible. It's really cool. I recommend it, but as a consistent rewatcher, this needs to be shorter. I gave it also 3.5 stars. Then I saw the Moulin Rouge. Oh my God. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I like Romeo and Juliet, and I really loved, actually, The Great Gatsby. And I think his style works so well in those movies, and this was such a flop, in my opinion. To me, it was such a mess. And his style is obviously really polarizing, and a lot of people think it's disgusting. I don't think the style is the problem here. I think everyone is toting this movie as like such a romance, and this is so like, these people love each other, they're so in love, they're so in love. When do they prove that? All they do is say that they're in love, but they don't, like, first of all, why? Why are they in love? Second of all, the whole thing is like this, oh yeah, like, oh, we're gonna kiss, mwah, and like, oh, well, you're in love with me, right? No, I'm not in love with you. Okay, just kidding, I am, but I can't be with you. And it's like, okay, but like nothing is established here. Like we don't know each other. I don't know. This didn't work for me. I think like the chaos of the style didn't complement the story, because I feel like the story had no legs to stand on, and I just was really bothered by the quickness of just like, oh yeah, now we need to expect these characters to be in love, and you know, she's gonna change her whole life based on what he wants to do. I just thought it was ridiculous. I thought the soundtrack didn't work for me either. Again, I know it's his thing. He does these kind of like crazy modern mashups. I just think it all worked better in The Great Gatsby. He figured it out. He figured it out in The Great Gatsby. This did not work for me. I gave it 1.5 stars. Then I saw Kill Bill Volume 1. I was so surprised by how much I loved this one. I did not expect how campy this was gonna be and how silly and fun. This is so fun. It's insanely gory, and there's obviously a lot of murder, death, blood, gore. But I had a blast. It's colorful, it's shot well. The martial arts choreography was staggering. I deeply appreciate that it wasn't hypersexualized. They were true, strong women that were beating the shit out of each other. I can't say enough good things about it. I had a fucking blast. I can't wait to see Volume 2. I still haven't seen it yet. 5 stars. 5 stars, 100%. Then I saw The Miseducation of Cameron Post. I remember seeing the trailer for this when it came out and thinking, oh, okay, so it's like a serious version of But I'm a Cheerleader. I was really pleasantly surprised by this. Again, this is based on a book, and I'm really interested in reading the book because the movie seemed to dedicate a lot of time just to her at the conversion center, and the book is taking into account her upbringing and her hometown and the people that she was around all the time, more about her and her friends before she got caught. And I think that that context would be valuable just for like a full view of these characters, but I don't think the movie suffers because of the absence of that context. I honestly truly appreciated the attention to detail in the dialogue of the people working at the conversion center specifically. It's really interesting to observe the way that these people at the conversion centers talk to young gay kids, because you need to manipulate them. You need to talk in a way that they're going to end up believing what you're saying, because they currently don't think they're doing anything wrong, right? They're coming to this conversion center not on their own, but because they're being forced to, which is so fucking evil. But you need to like make them believe that they are wrong and that they are sinning. And the way that they talk is careful, very careful language that was pretty fascinating as a viewer, honestly, to experience in real time and kind of observe the change of Cameron as she begins to believe in what they're telling her. I really recommend this. I thought it was really pretty. This is Chloe Grace Moretz's best performance ever. I'm trying to think of another one. She normally gets on my nerves, and I loved her in this. I was super impressed. 4 stars. Then I saw The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is from Yorgos Lanthimos. I think I'm saying that right. Now that I think of it, I've seen quite a few of his movies, and I didn't realize this was his until I started watching it, and then I was like, this is the weirdest delivery I've ever heard. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is Yorgos's delivery. This was really interesting. If you've seen anything from Yorgos Lanthimos, he did The Favorite, which got a lot of critical attention, and Dogtooth, which is one of my favorite films ever. He has a very distinct style, and everything is very deadpan, which sounds kind of silly like when you first start watching the movie, but it adds to this really foreboding atmosphere. And obviously this is sort of a psychological thriller, so this really bizarre tone through the entire film just makes you unsettled as a viewer. So it's very his handwriting, but it works. It functions so well in this movie. I really enjoy the strangeness of it all. I would just recommend going into it. It's a good one. I know the director really likes the really wide camera. It's not really fisheye, but like the wide camera where the characters are dwarfed by their surroundings. And I think in this film that wasn't as necessary as like The Favorite or Dogtooth, specifically for the meanings, the purposes of those stories. So I thought stylistically that was only there to operate as a fingerprint, and if you're looking for some psychological weirdness, give it a whirl. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Speaking of more psychological thrillers, that night I saw It Follows. This is a rewatch for me, but Oliver hadn't seen it before. I love this movie. I am a fan of horror movies and psychological thrillers, and I am especially a fan of horrors and psychological thrillers that have very specific aesthetic values and purposes. And this one is so aesthetically pleasing. I think it's shot really well. The music is so defining of the movie. I think anytime anyone's talking about this thing, they talk about the soundtrack. I think it's a little too present at times. I think the music goes on too long. There needs to be a little bit of emptiness, I think, for it to really work. But I love this thing, man. And I think some of the critique for this one is talking about the questions and how many questions are left after you watch it, where it's like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Finding loopholes of the curse and how Jay could have gotten out of it somehow. And there's something about this movie, I can't really place why, but I appreciate the questions that I'm left with. And especially at the end, we are left with an obvious question. And they choose to make it super open-ended. Oh, wait, this came out in 2014. Okay, I'm just gonna spoil it. Spoils. So you're left at the end with the two main characters who have had sex with one another, so they should both be cursed, but you don't know if they ended up winning and defeating the curse. So there's someone falling behind them in this neighborhood, and you don't know. Is it just a person just walking? They've got a backpack. They're just kind of hanging out. Is that just a person? I like that this encourages you to think. And to me, it doesn't feel like any of these questions are due to sloppiness from the writers or directors. It's just like encouraging. As you're watching it, you think, God, what would I do? And you're kind of haunted by that. I love this thing. I gave this one 4 stars. Then I saw Good Time to continue with my Safdie brothers. I was so surprised by this. This was recommended a few times to me. This has been on Netflix for a long time. A lot of people I deeply respect love this movie. I only really took the plunge because I was so impressed with Uncut Gems. And now I'm just fully a fan of the Safdie brothers. This was challenging for me as a viewer because I felt like there were so many complexities in the characters that weren't fed to me. It wasn't like so obvious that this is the good guy or the bad guy, but I could really absorb it. And that doesn't happen a lot because I went into film school and I felt like I was always confused and always on the outside of what people could understand about cinema. And I really appreciated that this spoke to me and this really got into my brain and I could understand it and critique it. As a Californian, this movie feels like New York. The tone of this is anxiety-inducing, just like Uncut Gems, but in a different way. You're kind of watching Howard in Uncut Gems just like fall down this inescapable hole of bad decisions with all of these enemies encroaching in on him. And with this one, there's one enemy, which is the law, basically, and Connie's trying to be real careful going around it. But in the end, he's just like responsible for his own downfall because he can't stop breaking the law. And you end up following him through trying to get his brother out of jail and failing, being left with the brother who is mentally handicapped and not responsible for any of these bad things that have happened to him. And it's really sad. It's really hard to watch and really emotional in the end, watching the brother. And again, just like any other Safdie's picture, looks good, sounds good, performances are good. This is so excellent from Robert Pattinson. I gave it 4 stars in the moment, but I think this is higher than that. I'm probably gonna give it 4.5 stars. Then I saw the new HBO Max picture, The Fallout. This one didn't really do it for me. However, now that I think back on it, I'm actually a bit more impressed than I initially gave it credit for, because all through this video, I've been talking about dialogue, and good dialogue and bad dialogue. And I think to make reasonably sounding teenager dialogue while handling really complex and sensitive topics is damn right impossible, and they do it. It's completely wrong to ignore that. And so for me to be like, oh, this didn't really do much, I think that's a staggering feat in and of itself, because it's impossible to write for teens anyway, because everyone always thinks it's so cringy. But these performances were incredibly natural. I have a feeling that a lot of the dialogue was ad-libbed when the characters become closer and they're just hanging out in the pool. It feels a little less structured, where they're just kind of talking to each other, which is nice because we're building a relationship with them. I would say that this kind of falls in the same category as Short Term 12 for me, where it's like, yeah, no, everything about it was good, but I left with very little. It didn't have a lasting impact on me. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. To finish off my Safdie brothers journey, I saw Heaven Knows What, which I believe is the 3rd of 3 feature films from them. This was a bummer. Again, like I said previously, I absorb a lot of media about drugs and addicts, and I was not expecting this to be as gritty as it was. Obviously, the Safdie brothers excel at super anxiety-inducing media, and I think this has a different level of anxiety. Like, it's this low-key, where it never really builds too high. It's just always like under the surface, where this woman is homeless, so she's constantly living under this stressful cloud hanging over her head, and not to mention she's evading this horrible boyfriend in her life who's like constantly making things harder for her, and she's an addict, so she's got to get her next fix, so she's constantly like manipulating people and getting what she wants in order to get what she wants. So it's sad because it's just endless. It's endless bad news for these characters. But one thing that I learned when I was reading after seeing the movie is that this is based on a memoir from Arielle Holmes of her time as a drug addict in New York City, who was in love with a crazy guy, and she is actually our main actress. So she's playing the fictional version of herself of her own life, which is incredibly moving to imagine having to like go back into that part of your life and take out all of that trauma from this horrible portion of your existence. And I thought that this was great. I think it's their first feature film together, and it's a little independent. It has moments of being a little sloppy and kind of weird. There's a hard style music dance break kind of right in the middle. In my opinion, didn't need to be there. But this is really sad and really hard to watch. But if you like character studies like I do, I absolutely recommend it. And it does feel like it fits really well within their filmography as directors. Very New York, very gritty, very anxiety inducing. I loved this, 4.5 stars. Oh my God, we're at the last movie, guys. Yesterday, which is my final movie for the month, I saw Moonstruck. Moonstruck is my friend Chloe's favorite movie, and she's like, can't believe you haven't seen this, you need to watch it. This came out in 1987, and it's about Loretta, a bookkeeper from Brooklyn, finding herself in a difficult situation when she falls for the brother of the man that she agreed to marry. Did I mention that Loretta, our main character, is Cher, and the brother of the man she agrees to marry is young Nicolas Cage. This movie is awesome. It's insane. It's incredibly Italian. It's stupid, and I loved every second of it. This is so campy, so silly, pretty over the top. They're constantly talking about the moon, bringing love, and the moon knows when you're lying. It's just really silly. But honestly, I think Nick Cage and Cher have quite a bit of chemistry together. I think Cher was really good in this. This is the first time I've seen a movie of her acting, and I was super impressed. I liked it. I mean, I like bad movies, so is it wrong for me to give The Fallout 3.5 stars and to give this 4 stars? Maybe. But I think this had a little bit more of a lasting impression because I was so blown away by how much I enjoyed it. It was a fun time, so Italian, and young Nick Cage is super hot. So there's no way to lose in this situation. Watch the movie, enjoy it, It's insane. I gave this one 4 stars. Holy shit, we got to the end. We're gonna do statistics corner in a moment, but that's the end. I saw 33 movies this month. I'm pretty pleasantly surprised with the manageability of this challenge, but I'm really looking forward to continuing this. I want you, please, to participate. Participate in this media. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, what you want me to watch next. Let me know if you're interested in that facial animation video essay. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next month. Goodbye!